It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Meche, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is a small world realtor and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champion School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Meche, and I am the Smoker Broker. Happy Thursday to you. Hope everything's going well. Hope everything's fantastic. It's getting better for everybody. At least it seems that way. You know, trying to put this pandemic behind us, moving forward. I mean, I don't know if you can put it behind us. It's going to be with us for a while, but I think it's becoming more accepted that it's out there. It's not like we're watching the death count every 5 seconds and, sitting there worried about what we can do, what we can't do. We're starting to adapt to it in the best way we can and move forward. Now, one of the interesting things that I found, I've mentioned this on the last couple of shows, but it's even more so vindictive today. And I'm actually going to give a more personal opinion on it as far as what I've seen, because I've been out a lot more over the last few weeks. But one thing's for sure, there's about 50% of the people out there that have their mask on. And then there's 50% of the people out there that do not have the mask. The people that have the mask on get irritated at the people who don't have the mask on, and the people who don't have the mask on get irritated at the people who have them on. This country has always been like that. It's always been split that way, and it's never going to be fixed. You're always going to have different opinions out there, and that's going to be a struggle for most people. But I will say this, and this is the personal part I have about it. It's a free country, and that's probably one of the greatest things that has been exposed during this pandemic. The freedom to be smart, the freedom to be stupid, the freedom to do whatever you want. It's your choice. I'm not saying it's right either way. I'm not saying it's right whether you put the mask on. I'm not saying it's right whether you don't put the mask on. What I am saying is wrong is for you to put judgment on somebody else. That's not your place. It's not your place to judge somebody else. It's not our place to judge somebody else. It is, in fact, a free country. And if they want to do it and they want to be smart, stupid, whatever, that's their choice to do whatever they want to do. We cannot do anything about it. Now, I will admit, and it's kind of like the syndrome where you have an annoying neighbor and there's nothing you can really do about it. One thing that is unfortunate is if you are one of the ones that wear the mask and there's a ton of people out there that don't, it's really not going to do anybody any good. And I think that is unfair to the people that do wear the mask because they're like, well, if everybody's not going to do this, this is just a lost cause. And that's very possible. It's a possibility that it is a lost cause. So it's a very different time for us. And everybody's going to do their own thing. That's obvious. I mean, anybody who's been out over the last few weeks would acknowledge that statement. It literally is 50-50. But I've seen way too much judging on what you can and can't do. And I've seen actually people enforcing in public what they think is right or wrong. And I'm like, you got to be careful with that. Don't get me wrong. Some of the people that make their suggestions are like, you're right on the money, but that's not our place. That we are not here to make somebody else do something else. The other thing the pandemic's really pushed, and it almost pushed it far enough that I started wondering about it, is whether a business can operate if they choose to or not. It is amazing how far you can be told what you can and cannot do. This country is very resilient on how it reacts. And it's funny, I'm of the opinion that they've walked a very fine line with making people understand you need to do this for this reason, but not saying don't do this because I told you so. And that's been a tough call for a lot of people. And thankfully, I think we're past that piece of it. I think we're past the you can, you can't, because I think everybody's accepting that we're moving forward one way or the other. Now the real truth becomes, how are people upset by what's being done and what's not being done? So new phase. We've talked about COVID for the first 5 to 10 minutes of every show for the last 2 months, as we should. But as far as real estate goes, I can tell you right now, in the state of Texas, we are moving forward. Of course, we're being careful, and we're adhering to the strict social distancing rules, which, by the way, is the key. This whole thing, it's the social distancing that's the key. It's not being right next to someone, being in close confined spaces, talking to someone with their spit hitting. I'm the worst. If you're in any of my classes or you're at this poor laptop, I mean, it's going to come out. And that's the problem out in the general public is that when you talk to someone like that, when you're that close to them, it's very hard to prevent those types of things. So a good strict social distancing and hopefully a vaccine in the next 6 months or so will really help us move forward. But we're doing it anyways because that's how we do things. We're moving forward. Want to share something before we get into our topic today, which is a really good one. We are talking about investing today. And we don't do this very often, but I'm very fortunate that I have professional investors on my team, and they are very good at what they do. So they're going to share a lot of their information today. I want to make sure that I saw a study yesterday, and I was very surprised by it. And I don't get surprised very often, especially when it comes to real estate. And I shared this for those that follow me and that are on my Facebook. It's unbelievable. The chart on the showings in the state of Texas, there's only really one group that tracks the showings in the state. The showings, of course, they dipped in March and April significantly compared to 2019. But what's amazing is in the last 3 weeks, showings have outpaced May 2019. That's insane. And that basically is a very big indicator that as far as real estate goes, they're moving on. They're moving forward. And it is very possible in Texas, the show is across the country, but in Texas, it's possible that we might not be scathed so much from this pandemic. I thought about something too after I posted that yesterday. I didn't think about how that affects other people. The East Coast and the West Coast people, they probably don't like that post because they don't have that same thing right now. They don't have that luxury. That's what I was trying to say. They don't have that luxury. And in New York, they are not seeing showings spiking. And when I said that, I'm like, should have been more, a little bit sensitive about that. But I'm not going to be disappointed in the fact that Texas is moving on. That's what we practice. That's what we're doing. And I do think if there is any good news, it should be pushed on regardless. So I thought that was pretty amazing to really set the stage. Okay, with that said, we are going to talk about the foundations of residential investing today. We are going to bring on two of my guys, and I always like to bring my crew on because I cannot do this show by myself. But today I'm going to bring on two of my what I consider professional investors. I've got Andy Webb with me and I've got Alan Rosner. These are two of my veteran guys that really know what they're doing when it comes to their residential real estate investing. A lot of times I'll listen to them. A lot of people who know me, I'm a very savvy investor over the years. I've flipped a lot of homes, although I haven't flipped a lot in the last few years because these guys are going to tell you it's been kind of tough to do. And we're going to share why that's been a little bit tough to do over the last couple of years. But it's still a part of what we can do. And if we do it the right way, we're still able to do it. So we're going to talk about several topics. We've been trying a lot harder to give you some takeaways on the show. I can tell you today, what you're going to take away from this is one, they're going to really talk about why they flip something versus why they rent something. There's a big difference between flipping and holding. So they're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about why and what they analyze and to make that decision. Is that what they are going to do or is that what they are not going to do? And then we're going to talk about how the appreciation and depreciation, and depending on what state you are, it makes a difference as to how we utilize these things. All right, before I introduce Andy and Alan, I want to make sure I thank our sponsor out there, BPG Inspections, Martin Cooley. His information scrolls on the bottom there. His license number is 5595. You can reach him at 817-401-3240. Martin is a great home inspector in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He is the one our group primarily uses. We always refer out multiple inspectors when we're going through and trying to choose somebody, but we actually believe that he does a very good job compared to a lot of others out there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about him later too and giving more of his information. Andy, tell him who you are, where you've been, what you've been doing, why you do real estate, all that good stuff.
Sure. Andy Webb. I'm in north of Dallas, a suburb north of Dallas.
Here, I'll do the sign language for him.
Am I muted?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. I heard sign language. I thought maybe I wasn't coming across, but we've been living here in the Carrollton area for actually closed on this house 8 years ago, and started investing in real estate as soon as we bought this house. We said, hey, we want to start accumulating some rental properties, and over the last 8 years, that's what we've
Andy,
done.
Your mic's muted.
My mic is muted.
No, your mic muted. You're good, Andy.
You can hear me. Alan's muted. Yeah, I see you. Anyhow, to your point, Robert, flipping, we have actually never sold a property. We prefer to hang on to them. Now, we can sell them at some point. Over time, over 8 years, those ones that we bought 8 years ago, they've built up a tremendous amount of equity, which is kind of like a little bank account, which we've tapped into actually from time to time. But we just like to see the wealth building, the cash flow that comes from month to month. And I'll tell you what, when the pandemic broke out, we were actually in an RV in a state park in Alabama. And you know what? We just hunkered down for 3 weeks, said, we're just going to stay right here because there's no one else around. And we could do that because of the cash flow coming in off of the rentals every month. It made it possible.
Yeah,
that's why we do it.
I love you taking the take on the fact that you're not one of those that just sells them. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot to be said. Hey, Alan, you should be able to hear Andy. Can you hear Andy? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear him. Well, that's weird. Why can you hear me? Mark, why can he hear me, but he can't hear Andy? That's kind of strange. I've never seen that before. Yes, it means that something's wrong and you're in. Hey, Alan, log back out and come back in because there's something that's a glitch there. All right. And then we'll bring you back and we'll keep talking with Andy. Yeah, that's weird because it's not supposed to do that. He can hear me. He can't hear you. So it's interesting. You talk about the hold. So, Robert Kowski's really big about flipping and holding. He's always been very protective of the fact that, you flip to get rich, but you hold to get wealthy. This is a common conversation that he has. And he's of the belief that holding is where the true wealth is. Now, we have someone in the Keller Williams environment, Jeff Cohn, who's a big real estate agent that came over from Berkshire Hathaway, pretty much the same time we came over. He's big on this too. He's big on that theory that you can flip all you want and you can make all this money, and it's great to have paper money. But if you want to have true wealth is driven by owning assets. It is. You want the assets out there. And a lot of people forget that. A lot of people jump in there and they're like, oh, I want my money right now. I want to get in there and get my money. And that sometimes isn't the best move to make. I mean, in the end, I think every professional investor would tell you their ultimate hope is to have many properties, as many as they can, and they're able to maintain those over time to where they provide a residual income. I think that's what most people would say.
It gives you options. Ultimately, you can sell, you can continue to hold, you can refinance. It just gives you your net worth goes. I mean, it's just options is what it comes down to.
Yeah. Can you hear him now, Alan? Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
All right.
Some type of glitch or something. So, Alan, give your perspective on. Andy has a different perspective about. He holds a lot of his property. In fact, he doesn't flip at all. And you're kind of the same way with that. Talk about your belief and why you like to hold those properties.
So I weigh it from the standpoint of return on investment. So the old ROI that everybody has been grown up with, like I think we've flipped 2 properties in the past 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't really flipped them because it doesn't make any sense to, unless you can, like the last one was a property that when we did the math on how much we would earn, and plug that into how many years would it take to earn that amount of money, it was like 22 years. So I'm going to get 22 years worth of return on investment today instead of waiting 22 years. So
now, what's the main reason why is it so hard to flip right now? What's the big obvious out there? Why is it that we can't just go out there and find something to flip? I mean, what holds us back the last few years?
Well, I just bought my first house in February. I think we closed. No, we closed in March, and it's the first house I've been able to buy in about 18 months, 19 months. I mean,
And that's because
it's because the some realtors are convincing the homeowner that their properties are worth X, and without doing their due diligence, it could be worth X if the homeowner would spend $65,000 to make it worth that.
right.
But they're pricing themselves out of the market. I'm seeing. I do a monthly trend away from what Texas Realtors does, and what I do is I track days on market. That's the only thing that I watch in my price bracket.
Right.
And in doing so, I've been finding that the days on market over the last 60 days has almost doubled
Yeah.
because people are pricing themselves, in my opinion, way too high. And you could, the whole thing about buying up a piece of property, and Andy probably would agree, I can make an offer for anything. If somebody's asking $250,000 for their house, I can go in there and offer them 150. But it just puts people in such an adversarial position, and you can't get anywhere. And then later somebody comes in and maybe offers 225, and he's going to go in there and fix the house. But I see the house show back up 2 years later in the same condition, and they're trying to get trying to get out of it. So.
Well, one of the bigger phenomenons out there, and you're speaking to it to some extent, the market has been such at a peak here in Dallas, Fort Worth, and across the country for the last few years. What we're having is almost a hangover. You're having a hangover from a really good market. You've had such a strong market for 3 or 4 years where sellers ruled, they priced their houses, which has been terrible for investors. I mean, honestly, I have to admit, I'm very amused when I have a client over the last 4 years that says, hey, I'm looking for a deal. I'm like, yeah, join the rest of us and get back way behind us, because believe me, if there was a deal, we would have already found it.
That's right.
And we're not just going to throw those things out there. There are no deals right now. Well, actually, it's getting better. But the last 3 or 4 years, there haven't been many deals because the properties are so high. I mean, when we talk about flipping, and I think we've talked about this before with both of you. Well, more for Alan. Andy knows it, but he just doesn't do it. We at least want what, Alan, 30 to 40% below market value before we even think about it.
Yes,
we're not
exactly
going to do it. We're not pulling 20%.
Yeah, the margin's just not been there.
Well, Andy. So when you're buying, let's talk about this because it applies to both flipping and for holds. When you're wanting a hold property, where are you satisfied at what you buy that property at? What's your happiness point where you're like, hey, this is good?
I look at a couple of things. I want to see a certain level of cash flow after principal interest. We put mortgages on the property. So after principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, right? PITI. We want to see cash flow usually around $400 a month. After that, that helps us absorb any, maintenance or whatever may come up later. And we want to have a low out of pocket getting into the deal. Right. We don't buy conventionally by putting 20% down. We buy junkers that need a lot of work. We buy it with hard money, close once, fix it up, and then refinance into longer term, low interest rate debt. And through that process, we're buying things at a fairly decent discount, and having out of pocket into the deals, $7K, $10K, maybe $20K. It depends. But those have been harder to find as well. So I'm not going out and just buying something 20% down, costing me $40,000 out of pocket.
You're an interesting case because a lot of investors are big on putting a lot down, so the cash flow is bigger. But you're of the opinion, right, you like to put a lot of sweat equity into that house and get it to where you want it to be. You're still a 20 to 30% below market value guy, but you're going to change that over to where you put some sweat equity into it and put more value into it, and then really condense. I like the fact that, and I know Alan does this too, and he's going to talk about that. Both of you are very good at leveraging. Both of you are experts at leveraging your money as to where to put it. You're really taking a property and saying, hey, I've got some money here. I can take some and move it into another. And I think that's one of the biggest foundations of real estate investing is the leverage to be able to do that, to be able to take a property, grow it, and then go to the next one and continue to build like this massive colony, or
Right.
town or village until you hit to where you're satisfied with the amount of houses you have. I mean, let's face it, and I'm biased because real estate's our business, but anybody out there that acquires at least 4 or 5 properties in their lifetime, and as they approach their retirement and they've paid just at a minimum 4 or 5, like where they've paid them off and at that point in their retirement, they're going to live off of that. They can. That's pretty damn comfortably off of that. God forbid if they have 10, 15, or 20. And that's the key for most people out there, is to make them understand this is a very good wealth alternative. And right now, more than any time in this country's history, real estate continues. It always has and it always will. It continues to prove its dominance from the financial statement part of it. The stock market, look, no matter who's out there listening to me, no matter whether you two guys are on it or not, I don't care what anybody says. I know my money's safe in real estate, especially in Texas. I might not be able to say that East Coast, West Coast, but I promise you, if I go put $50,000 into a house and I pay like $200,000 for it, I can damn well wake up tomorrow and know it's still worth $200,000. And over time, there's going to be an equity gap. We're going to talk about that because to me, that's extremely important. When you're talking about, we have a lot of people that watch the show, a lot of new agents watch the show, and we have a lot of veteran agents. And my guess is we'll have a lot more veteran agents watching today because of YouTube being on. But when you start going through and you're looking about the amount of money that can be produced wealth-wise in owning real estate, now is the time more than ever as a real estate agent to be approaching the friends that you have, the family that you have, and say, hey, look, how much did you lose in the stock market? Yes, I know it'll probably come back, but it always does that. And if it catches you at a bad time, you might not like what happens, because that's what's happened to a lot of people who are that close to retirement right now. They just got a big whoop, because now they're like, now I've got to go on for another 10 to 15 years. Whereas in real estate, that's not necessarily the case. And now is the time for the agents out there to be utilizing that approach with their friends, especially the ones with money. And, I like talking about this because a lot of people put the sales person tag on it. I hate being called that. I'm not a sales guy. I'm telling you right now, I can help you. I can go show you something that can make you money. If you want to put X amount of money up, I can prove it to you that this property over time will make money. That's different. That's different from telling someone, oh, you ought to go buy a house right now. We're telling you that we can help you with this. We can show you where those properties are. And that's why they're here, to talk about their experiences. So let's talk a little detail about that. Let's talk about when you guys get into the house. Alan, talk about your initial, when you walk, what are you most concerned about when you get in there? What are you most happy about when you go into those houses?
So the first thing that I look at when I'm going to go walk into a house, believe it or not, is I look at the roof and I take a walk around the outside of the property. When I just walk one revolution around it, I'm looking at the foundation. If it's exposed, I'm looking if it's not exposed, or if it is exposed, looking for any brick movement, looking for anything that's up on the that's out of that just seems out of whack on the roof. The biggest thing that you can, biggest tip off that I've found is chimneys separated away from the side of the house. You see that something's moving. It's either the chimney's moving or the house is moving.
Structural indicator, right? I mean, it's the biggest
exactly.
one out there. If that moves, something else did too.
Exactly. So, and then once I get inside, I start looking for the obvious signs: the cracked drywall above the windows, above the doorways. Looking for any separation of the flooring from the walls. I mean, you can see, when you walk into some of these homes, you can almost immediately tell that work has to be done to some kind of stabilization of the foundation.
And guys, for our listeners out there, Alan's really talking about, he knows this, but for the rest of y'all, he's talking about the guts of the house. He is talking about the major things. He's not talking about whether a doorknob's loose. He's talking about whether it's foundation work, electrical work, plumbing work, roof work. Those are what we consider to be the guts of the house, because those are the things that have the highest dollar amount on them. So when we walk through, we start looking at those. I loved how Alan, like I said, I brought professional investors on here. Alan makes a very subtle comment about the chimney. You would think the chimney is no big deal. Well, the chimney is one of the largest structure pieces on the property. If it's moved, it's at the top. If it moved at the top, that means it moved to the bottom. It's moved in.
So I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you a picture here of it was found in the master bedroom closet.
Yeah.
As you can see what that is, and then we move to the next photograph, and it's the electric box.
Yeah.
How many times have you looked at a house with one of your customers, with one of your clients, and you walk in? How many of you have gone over and opened that electric box to take a look-see inside? You tend to start seeing things that don't make any sense.
Alan,
things
I'd say less than 90%.
I would, yeah.
Do that.
If you look at this fuse, it's in the I guess it's the upper right of the picture. These are the cheap ways. These are the cheap 50s. They didn't it should have been at any rate. You learn this over time as you go as you flip. And Andy was laughing.
Your point's valid. Looking at the box itself, most people don't even look at the box.
They don't even open it up. They don't even. What is this?
But as an investor, that's critical, right? That panel's in a closet. Depending on the municipality, if you're turning it into a rental, they may or may not allow that. You may have to flip it to the outside. It could be one of the bad boys that Martin Cooley will call out on his inspection reports, which say Federal Pacific, all red letters. Maybe it has some flames. I don't know how he does his, but they're just, it's one of those kind of more or less structural big ticket items that you have to learn to identify. And I'll tell you, I think, Alan, investors that work with clients as well that are just buying their own homes for their personal purposes, my radars are always going off. I can't turn them off any longer. I walk into a house, I don't care what you're going to do with it. I'm going to see that and tell you.
Exactly. And then the thing that you worry about is like aluminum wiring houses. You sit there. It was the staple. It was the standard from 1945 until 75, 76. Aluminum wiring is probably the most prevalent in most of these houses that we're looking at that were built in the 60s and 70s, and you gotta go. You sit there and go, oh, how do I fix that? Do I tear out all the wiring in the house, or do I put a little jumper in, or what do I do? And these are the things that you as a realtor or you as an investor really need to pay attention to. And I'll tell you what, Andy, how many houses have you walked away from? Because I'm sure I'm probably in the same.
I was about to say the same thing. That's one of the few things that still scares me, and I don't get scared by much. But when I see the aluminum wire, I'm like, I don't want to mess with this. I go, man, that's one of the only things I still think that an inspector quotes that is a true fire hazard. I'm like, I don't know, man. Those things, that is not the way that stuff is built these days. I still get nervous when I see that.
Although I have to say, you can remedy them. You can remediate it by replacing the wires. You can pigtail them. There are aluminum rated fixtures and outlets and that sort of thing. Right. So it is fixable. Fortunately, I haven't seen that a whole lot.
Most people have corrected it. Most people have got to where they know that that's going to be an issue. One thing I enjoy about this show too, and I'm not very shy when it comes to what my strengths are and my weaknesses are. A lot of people come to me because I have expertise in real estate. I've never been shy about the fact I am not the greatest expert on the hardcore real estate investing from the structure standpoint, like these guys, like what they're talking about when it comes to, like Andy was just talking about the aluminum replacement. I'm not very well aware. I know those exist, but I'm not smart enough to quote those off the top of my head. I don't look at that. Go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was going to say, and that's something, for the person that's listening that is thinking about becoming an investor, or maybe has that friend that as a realtor you want to maybe pull into investing, you tell them, what age of house do you want to work with? Because like Alan said, you're going to see those in the older houses. So maybe you start with the 80s build and newer, which is going to have newer guts, newer wiring, right?
Always start off with the, hey, look, where's your threshold? Because if it's really thin, then we don't want to be looking at these. But if it's Maybe we can get to the 80s, 90s. We should be good. 2000, we're not going to have a problem. But
Hey, I've got houses that were built in 1929 in my portfolio. I mean,
you got to have someone who knows what they're doing on those.
But here's one thing that I want to stress to everybody, because what makes this investing, and I'm going to put in air quotes, easy, is when you do get the property, don't just put a coat of paint on it and stick a renter in it right away. I can promise you that every property needs $15,000 to $20,000 worth of work. I can just promise that to you.
You can get away with 8 to 10, but it probably needs 15 to 20.
Probably,
right?
Exactly. Probably needs 15, 20, 25,000.
I got you.
Spend the money today. When you spend that money today and you structure that rental property and you get the $400 positive cash flow, and that's after everything, you will not get that phone call in the middle of the night from that customer says his toilet is clogged up. Well, why is his toilet clogged up? Well, because you didn't replace that toilet when you went in there and you saw the what I call the S plumbing on the back of the toilet. Where you'll see it go like this, when you should be buying them that just that just do a C. That's
so
in a C shape.
I want to comment on that because that's really important. It's also another reason why I'm proud to have you guys represent our crew from an integrity standpoint. There are a lot of investors out there. They will shortcut. When they flip those houses, they will shortcut the living shit out of them. I mean, they will do as minimal as they can to turn that thing. And good real estate agents catch on. They catch on when they see it. They come in and they're like, look, this is totally not done. You guys came in here, you put carpet, you put paint in, you do a damn thing. This toilet's flushing slow. There's something in that line. The inspector didn't catch it. Those are the things that cause real issues with someone who flips. And I like the fact that my professional investors, and when I say my professional investors, our relationship, is the fact that you guys are very good at going out there and saying, hey, look, I don't want any problems with this. I want to make sure it's right. I want to make sure that this is my property. I give a damn about it, which is the thing I find funny about an investor who does that. I'm like, don't you give a shit about that property at all? Don't you care just a little bit about the dwelling itself? Shouldn't you be the one that wants to make sure that
brings me to full circle with property managers. Let me ask you, like you just said, who amongst us three is going to take care of a property better than us three who own that property? Name me one person. You're not going to find one.
The care's not high enough.
It's just not there. They want their 10% and they run off, and that's the end of that. They don't care who they put in your house. That's the frustrating thing. But we can have another show talking about how to select tenants.
You said that. I'm glad you said that because you're right. That is another show, and it's really one we probably ought to have because it's interesting what we perceive as to how we bring someone in to the tenant selection process. That's a really good show.
Put that on. Put that on the schedule for a little bit later.
I'm going to write that down because I actually like that one. All right, I want to talk a little bit about this appreciation depreciation thing, and then I'm going to come back into some of the other things you guys look at. Let me give a little bit more information on our sponsor because we always appreciate having them. Like I said, Martin Cooley with BPD Inspections is the guy that we use for primarily most of our inspections in the SWR group. A lot of people don't know that Martin is a veteran of the United States Navy. He was in the engineering section there. He does pest control. Actually, he's a certified COVID-19 ASHI guy. I didn't know that. That's recent there. He does mold inspecting, HVAC, pool, and spa. And like I've told everybody many times, it's his bedside manner that I like. He goes in there. He doesn't scare the customers off. He doesn't freak them out. He tells them what it is. It's very easy for us to read the report. And it's been someone that's very favorable for us to work with in the SWR group and in the Keller Williams environment as well. His information is on the bottom there. It keeps scrolling through throughout. Highly suggested use if you're looking for a good inspector, someone who's really fair. Okay, I want to go through and talk about this appreciation, depreciation thing from an economic view. You guys are the structural guys. I want to talk about from the economic side of it because we have something that's very unique in Texas that it's one of my favorite things to discuss. It's one of my favorite things to teach because it plays such a vital role in the investment process. So The bad news about Texas is that, and this is with an asterisk, not including the last 3 or 4 years. The last 3 or 4 years have been so out of the, we're talking historically, okay? Historically, what happens in the state of Texas. So black out the last 3 or 4 years, historically, 60 to 70 past years in Texas. The bad news is we typically don't appreciate very much. We have a less than 2% appreciation rate in the state of Texas. That means if I go out and buy a house for $200,000, I'm lucky if it's at 202,000 the next year, or if it's still at 200,000. We don't rise very much. Okay. If you're in California, you'd be sick to that. California, you buy a house at 500K, you want that thing to be 700K the next year. Well, we don't do that here. And when you first hear that, your initial thought is, oh, well, that sucks. Texas is a lousy state. Got news for you. Texas, the number one investing state in the country. And you should find that weird. You should find that awkward, that if I just told you the appreciation is very low here, then why the hell would people come to invest in this state? Well, it's the latter part that's important. The bad news is we don't appreciate very much, but the good news is we hardly ever depreciate. In the worst market downturn in over 50 years, in 07 and 08, the average house lost 35 to 40% of its value throughout the entire country. Here in the state of Texas, we barely hit 3. We were almost unscathed because of this phenomenon that we don't go up and we don't go down. We stay very steady, very, very steady. And that is what investors like about the state of Texas. You know what we call most investors, the out-of-state ones in Texas? We call them Californians, because the Californians, they are the ones that come in. And that's odd. That's odd that someone from the highest appreciation state chooses to come here and put their money in play. And if you asked why, the most simplistic reason is because they know that if they go to bed and their value in their investment's $1 million, that they're going to wake up and it's still $1 million. In Texas, we earn money the old-fashioned way. Well, who was that? Was that John Hutton? Or I can't remember. One of those guys said that way back when. We make money the old-fashioned way. We earn it. And the way we do this is if we buy a dwelling at $200,000, okay, this is what we expect to happen. At $200,000, historically in Texas, we have low appreciation. So we have this type. It's going up just a little bit. But as we're doing this, we're paying off the debt. So we're going like this. And this stretches, okay?
We're not paying it off. The tenant is paying it off.
Somebody else is paying it off for us. This is our equity gap. This is where we make our money. And the reason that we have such low volatility, as long as we know that we put our money in at that point, over time, where the appreciation does this and the paying off does that, we are creating an income gap. That's where our money comes from. And I'm telling you, there is no better guarantee in this country and in this world financially than that statement right there.
That's right.
Because you can bet on it. You can actually count on it. There's never been a time that Texas is just trashed, ever. It's never gone in the toilet. It's always rose. And you know what the great thing about Texas is even better? Is that there's so much freaking land. We can continue to build. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if Austin, Houston, and Dallas at some point 100 years from now are all connected in one, because there's so much land. What are we talking about? A train now that goes to Houston in what, an hour? Or even 20 minutes or something like that? I mean, y'all, we're not that far away from connecting these things where, you know, being out like in Hillsboro, which is south of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, between Dallas and Waco, pretty much not a very high populated area. It's not that much of a shock maybe in another 5 to 10 years that's a suburb of one of these areas and you commute back and forth.
Well, look at the corridor, the 75 corridor going up to the Red River.
Yeah.
You've got all of a sudden Anna exploded. Melissa is on fire. North McKinney.
You just brought up a great point that really hammers this conversation in. And that's exactly where I'm heading with this. Do you know what we consider to be the northern suburb line for the Dallas-Fort Worth area, for everybody that's out there that's listening?
McKinney now.
Surprised by this. It's the Red River. It's Oklahoma.
Oh yeah, wow.
Right? And if you want to go south, we're almost in Waco to where
That's
we
right.
consider what our boundaries are. Think about it. We have a lot of people in southern Oklahoma that commute to Dallas Fort Worth. It is not that hard to live in southern Oklahoma and to commute into Dallas.
It's an hour.
The trains go into Denton. Denton's only like 25 minutes south of that Oklahoma border, a little further than that, but they can literally drive into Denton, catch the train, and then ride into Dallas. It's not that difficult. The tollway goes up into Salina now. Salina is only another 20 miles from the Red River. Our boundaries are huge. And because of this, and this is the point I'm trying to make, this is where all this gets hammered in. Because we have so much land in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, our prices are somewhat locked in. Now, I'm not talking about high-profile areas like South Lake, Highland Park. Those areas will always be different.
Kessler Park,
right. Nothing's going to change those. Those appreciations are always going to be wild.
right.
But if you live in Plano, which is a huge suburb in Dallas-Fort Worth, and you go in the market and you list your home at $400,000 and a buyer comes in and they're like, hey, I really like this, but I'm closer to 350 than I am 400. And the seller's like, well, I'm not going to do that. The buyer's like, fine, I'm going to get on that damn thing you call the tollway. I'm going to drive about 8 minutes further north. I'm going to get a new home with 1,000 more square feet, and I'm going to pay probably 30 to 40K less. That is what keeps everybody in check. That's what doesn't allow the Dallas-Fort Worth suburbs to get greedy, because they know that they can go further north or further south. Actually, we grow always now. It's amazing. The city of Fort Worth houses the largest corporations in the world. In fact, the largest if you count ExxonMobil and Las Colinas. You can sit there and flip rocks off of 820 and hit off the skyscrapers on vacant land. There is so much vacant land around the Dallas-Fort Worth area that it almost secures everybody who wants to invest over the years and the future a very solid career with making money on their investments, selling real estate. We are very fortunate in the Dallas-Fort Worth area because it's the land that lets us do this. So the reason why I bring this up in this conversation is you have to know something about Texas economics. If you're going to start flipping and or holding, you need to know these things. One of the biggest complaints we get is when someone says that we tell them their house is worth 200, and they're like, that's what I paid for it 20 years ago. And I'm like, and you should be damn well lucky it's still 200,000. I go, you could live in Vegas where it's worth half that. The key here is not, everybody thinks that we buy a house and it just makes money. Money in housing is made over time. It's made over time. It's not a quick fix. That stuff about nothing is that easy. You can't make money just like that. That's all true in real estate. It takes time. But if you do it right and you're like these two guys and they invest their money wisely, they have a very stable career. They have a very stable for their family. Their economics are strong. They are protected. They don't worry about the pandemics as far as their stock market stuff. In fact, these guys, I would be willing to bet, and I'm saying this in a very professional way because the pandemic's been terrible. They probably weren't so dipped about the pandemic bringing values down just a little bit. They probably were like, you know what? Those values might come down just a little bit to where they should for the longest time. Right, Andy?
That's exactly right. And that's the thing as well.
Not bad to say.
If you've got those friends on the sidelines or maybe yourself and you've been thinking about getting in, I think there's a good chance. I think we're fairly robust here. The market, like you said earlier, Robert, is still pretty hot. I mean, we just got a contract on the road here with the seller I'm working with in 4 days. I mean, stuff's turning over pretty good, but we haven't seen the full shakeout. So there is a chance that there will be some fallout, and you need to be ready to strike, right? Have some cash ready if you want to get into a property, for example.
You bring up a great takeaway from this show, and Alan's going to reiterate this too. All of us know that the crisis has pushed people being foreclosed on often probably till later part of this year.
August, September.
Next. When you start talking about having cash ready, Andy, that's a great takeaway because there's a strong possibility as we approach the end of the year where those banks are like, hey, look, we can't wait any longer. Now we need to go in and start foreclosing on these. There's going to be some property that comes available. And
Mhm.
the one thing that does annoy me from the financial side about the pandemic is that you've got a lot of people who are already in financial trouble that are using this to their advantage. They're like putting it out like, well, I was already going to be foreclosed on, so shit, now I'll just go ahead and escape on this. Those people are still in harm's way. They might be given a little bit of an extended stay, but those people are still in harm's way. And when you do throw in a significant unemployment rate, and I do believe the unemployment numbers are a bit skewed right now because I think that comes back, but it doesn't all come back. There is no doubt a lot of America is going to be unemployed, and that's going to cause a financial chaos on the back end of this. Now, a lot of people will always follow that up with, well, you guys should be scared of that. Y'all, let me give you a little tip about real estate. We never get scared about the real estate market. And these two are going to tell you more than anything. Here's the great part about being in real estate. If the market's hot, then we're selling a lot of property and we're making a lot of money. If the market goes in the tank, we are buying that property up because we know in another few years. I got to tell you, I would argue that I've probably made more money over the years when the market tanks because I know where to go to get those properties. I know exactly what to buy when the market goes, and I know for a fact that those things are going to be worth 30 or 40% more in a few years. That
just a few years ago, Robert, 2000 and I'll say 2014, I bought a house that was built in 2010. So it was a 4-year-old house. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, about 1,200 square foot. I paid $40,000 for it.
That's amazing.
It needed nothing, but I bought it through HUD, and it was a repossession. So I bought the house. I went through. It needed a paint job. We painted it, put a little bit of flooring down, and boom, we rented the property. But it was in a time of 2014. I don't know if you can remember that. 2014, we were kind of, it was a different America back then, and than it is today. So we've got 35 million people out of work, and that's going to affect whether or not they pay their mortgages. It all depends on banks and how they're going to work with their clients. Bankruptcy is going to come into play. You're going to see an uptick in bankruptcies. But all of this stuff boils down to, if you're the savvy investor, it doesn't matter what the market is doing. It's what individual transactions are going to do, and that's what you need to be finding.
Takeaway. That's probably, and both of you guys have so many ridiculous. That's a great takeaway from this show. The calmness, and the market does not dictate to us what it is that's going to happen. Right. We are concerned about the transactions that we do. We know that per our systems, and every investor has a system. We know by our systems when we go in that this is a good deal. And no matter what happens, this is going to continue to be a good deal for us. The question to us is, how many opportunities are out there that we can get our hands on? And that's what we focus our lifetime around, is looking at, hey, that's a good one. And I'm biased. I tell everybody, you should always have your real estate license. By the way, everybody out there, like Alan and Andy, they're very transparent. Their licenses for their personal stuff, but they're good real estate agents. Both of them are very good. Like the friends and their family that watch this, I'd trust them with any of my personal stuff, as far as if I was a client of theirs. And they are very smart. To me, your investor agent clients, they're the best that are out there, because they know not only the value, but they know the goods and bads of that house. So either way, these guys will tell you they're in it more for their personal portfolios, but they're very good. They're more humble about their real estate. They're very good real estate agents. Both of them are very skilled at what they do. And I love it when either one of them comes to me with something different besides their own. I'm like, good. You should help people. You guys are really good at this. You should be helping. But it's a good comment that I back up with a lot of things, in the fact that everybody should have their real estate license. It's smart to have it. These guys are very intelligent. They use it to their advantage. And plus, it makes them smarter in general. People look up to people who understand real estate. People respect people who are in real estate. They want to hear them. They want to hear what they have to say so that they can go through and make the right decisions. All right, we only have a few more minutes. I want you guys to talk briefly about a current event. I want your opinions on how is it you guys are having to handle the tenants right now with if there are issues or not. What are you guys doing? I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. Andy, you start. Go ahead.
Sure. And I mentioned at the start of the show, we began the pandemic in an RV out in the middle of the woods, essentially. And at that point in time, as we saw what was unfolding, my wife and I, we talked about it. We're in some mentoring groups. We've got a lot of peer groups that we get together with. We started doing that virtually, Zoom calls, that sort of thing. But the general consensus was, hey, let's reach out. Let's be communicative. Let's talk now before the stuff comes down the pike. So what we did simply was sent out an email individually, not to every house in one email, not a bulk, but address them, use their names, maybe mention a dog or whatever, personable, and just said, hey, look, here's how we're handling maintenance right now. We said, hey, we're not going to be sending every Tom, Dick, and Harry in to fix those small problems right now. Big ticket items, let us know. And by the way, if you run into any problems, we're here. Keep open lines of communication. We just told them to talk to us. We got a lot of very positive replies. Immediately knew that a quarter of our portfolio, by their responses back to us, saying, thanks for reaching out. Thanks for asking. We're all fine right now. So already at that point, we were able to breathe a sigh of relief. And since then, we've had good community. It's treating them like people, your residents, right? And
I almost hate that Alan has to follow that unless he's going to pretty much say the same thing, because that's a good answer. It's the communicative piece of making sure they're human beings,
sure,
and reasonable human beings. We're not letting people take advantage. And I think Alan will hit on that, because Alan's big about not letting anybody take advantage of him, but being very fair. And I love your response. Alan's very similar in a way. He's very stern when it comes to his tenants' responsibilities and how they are, because he's a very big do the right type of thing type of guy. But I love the communication piece of it and treating them the way you'd expect. If they want to abuse that privilege, then we will use what we need to remove them, because nobody's going to tolerate someone taking advantage of this situation. But on the other side, we have to have some sensitivity to, hey, man, the guy was working and he's been thrown out of his job. We got to figure out a way to give him some grace here to make sure that he makes it, because in all likelihood he will.
Well, and to that point, and you may have seen this as well, Alan, I guess TAR and I think TAA, Texas Apartment Association as well, both released, kind of a promulgated form that gives you the language to offer a payment plan. So if you have residents that are in that situation, and just to say, we've had zero problems, nothing late, everything on time, so full collections.
And so, like I said before about being your own property manager, how important it is. It's selecting the correct tenants. I can't stress enough that that's where it all begins. I have had zero. That's me knocking on the wood of problems. I had one tenant that asked me if they can break their payment in half because they're on unemployment and they got their stimulus money, but they have to make car payments and some other stuff. And I said, certainly, go ahead and pay half now. And here's an addendum that I'm going to give you that's going to give you permission to do that. Because my lease is pretty solid. It says you can't make payments on your lease.
Right.
And so I sent that to them. They signed it. And I got a Zelle payment. And then I don't know if you all heard the ding just a minute ago. I got the other half of this month's rent.
Congrats.
just now. So it all boils down to you have to be in control. This is your house. This is your investment. This is your life. And yes, this affects somebody else who's renting from you, but that doesn't give them the right to steamroll you. Yeah. And I'll give you a short story. I just renovated a house for one of my tenants, longtime tenant, been with us since 13. So the house was overdue for something. We didn't fully renovate it. That was one of my learning houses. So we ended up getting kind of took. Missy and I got kind of took on that by a contractor. So we learned very, very quickly on that house. So anyways, I wanted to bring that house and do it and give it the Allen treatment. So I put the tenants up in a hotel for 2 months while we renovated the property. Yeah, Andy, look at those eyebrows go up and down. But yes, it was the right thing to do. I worked out a deal with a local hotel, a Holiday Hampton Inn. They worked it all out for me. The rent that they were paying me, I had to match it for the same amount of rent, but put the tenants up for those 2 months. I renovated the property, and I put the tenants back into the property. Everything was smooth until the one tenant looks to me and says, "You know what? I don't like the color of this that you painted the inside of the house." And I looked at her and I said, "Wait, what you don't like the color of the house?" She says, "No, that's not what we discussed." I said, "Oh, so I'm not saying that I had you sign off on the color, but I will tell you that it's still my house. If
That's
you don't
right.
want to live here, you don't have to." And she said, we've been here since 2013. You're not going to throw us out, are you?" And I said, "That's not my choice.
Yeah.
That'll be your choice." Well, needless to say, everything is fine and they're making their payments like normal. But you can't kowtow to you cannot buckle. Yes, the governor says you can't kick somebody out in the 48-hour period that it normally takes, but don't let them steamroll you. There you go.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way to end the show, because I think so many people have taken the COVID as I have the freedom to do whatever. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have the freedom to do whatever. There's been some exceptions and there's been some flexibility more than there ever has been. But in the end, we still operate. And one thing of the many that's making me feel better as we continue to move this thing out and open up, I'm hoping that window of opportunity for those people who are using this to their advantage is very much shortened when they see the economy start coming back up. Because what you're going to see is like, we've had enough of that. We did this for temporary. You mentioned something else that I thought was a good takeaway. For those of you who don't think that the stimulus does anything, or you think that it's no big deal, did you hear how Alan subtly went through there and said he talked about their stimulus check, but they had to make payments on other things? The stimulus check did make a difference to a lot of Americans out there that were in binds and that needed. This isn't a scripted show. He just said that because he actually practices this day to day. That actually makes me feel good, because there's a lot of people out there think we've wasted money. And believe me, we have. There's some money wasted, as always. But there have been some people that have used that money, and it's twofold. Not only does it help them, but it actually helps the landlords as well, because they're hurting with this too. They're being shortened with their incomes by this. Some of them, catastrophically have been affected by it. So I love the fact that you threw that in there, because I think that's a great takeaway. Y'all, I cannot tell you how proud I am to have an association with you. I mean, I know lots of people that do investing. I know lots of people in the real estate industry. I'm very proud to have both of you as part of our group. I listen to the things you say. I think you personally know more than I do about some of that stuff. And I don't say that about many things when it comes to real estate, but I more than anybody look forward to the discussions. And I am actually embarrassed that this is the first time in 2 years we've had this show. And that's the last time that's going to happen. I would like this show to go on a quarterly basis where you guys.
You had a few things going on there, Robert.
I know, but I feel bad because you guys, look, I can tell by the comments, and I know through archive watch, there'll be a lot of people that watch the show. There'll probably be about 500 to 600 views by the end of next week, because they'll pick up on that, because this is meaningful information to them. Y'all, I want to thank y'all for coming on, taking your time today. I know you both are busy guys. Plus, for me personally, it was good being able to see you guys. There are some pluses in the environment that we have. At least now we still can see each other, and probably more so than we did the other way. So thank y'all for coming in. I hope to get to see you guys really soon. Thank everybody else for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the show. We'll be seeing you guys next week, as always, on Thursday from noon to 1. Y'all take care. Have a good one.